Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, look closely at the sources, and give you the insights you need to be, well, truly well informed.
And today we're tackling something universal: death, grief, and the often really fascinating, sometimes quite unsettling rituals cultures build around them.
It's something every human society faces, isn't it? But the way they face it, especially how they deal with the presence of the dead, can tell us so much.
Absolutely. It's a window into deeply held beliefs.
So our mission today is a deep dive into some very ancient, very widespread mourning customs. We're focusing on something particularly intriguing, the phenomenon of the silent widow.
And our roadmap for this is Sir James George Frazer's huge work, Folklore in the Old Testament. Specifically, we're digging into Part 3, Chapter 17.
Fraser's work is incredible. He doesn't just list facts, does he?
No, not at all. He uses what he calls ethnological parallels. So he compares practices from, vastly different cultures, and he uses these parallels to try and shed light on ancient beliefs, like those you might find hinted at in the Old Testament, which can seem pretty mysterious otherwise.
Okay, so as we start unpacking these customs,
Yeah.
what's Fraser's sort of core idea? What's driving these often very strict rules?
Well, he argues that a lot of it boils down to a really deep-seated, almost primal fear of the deceased person's ghost.
Fear of the ghost.
Yeah. Whether the rules are meant to help the living hide from the ghost or, push it away, or maybe convince it to just accept things and leave them alone, that fear seems to be the engine.
That's a really important starting point. Fraser points out that almost everywhere, a death means new rules for the survivors, especially the closest relatives. They often get the strictest ones.
Right. And even if the people following the rules maybe don't consciously think about the ghost anymore, Fraser argues the origin often lies in that fear, trying to avoid being noticed or harmed by the spirit.
It's amazing how widespread that is. He mentions the ancient Hebrews too, right? Like in the Book of Numbers.
Yes, exactly. They clearly had mourning restrictions, even if the texts don't always spell out the why behind every single one.
And this is where Fraser drops a really interesting linguistic clue,
Right.
potentially linking the Hebrews directly to this silence idea.
It's fascinating, yeah. He looks at the Hebrew word for widow, which is almana,
Okay.
and he puts forward this conjecture, this idea, that almana might actually come from an adjective that means dumb or silent.
Wow. So the word for widow could literally mean a silent woman,
That's the hypothesis, and if that's true, it immediately raises a big question for Fraser.
which is why?
Why would a widow specifically be called silent? What's the reasoning behind that?
Right. And that why is what kicks off this whole global exploration in the chapter, doesn't it? He starts looking for similar customs elsewhere to see if they offer an explanation.
Precisely. He's hunting for analogies, for parallels that might illuminate that potential Hebrew connection. And the examples he finds are pretty striking. This practice of widows keeping silent was surprisingly common.
So let's follow his trail. Where does he start? Africa.
He does. Among the Kutus in the Congo, widows there had a 3-month mourning period.
Okay. What did that involve?
Well, they shaved their heads, wore hardly anything, smeared their bodies with white clay, and crucially, they had to stay indoors and couldn't speak at all for those 3 months.
3 whole months of silence. That's intense.
It is. And then you look at the Sihanaka in Madagascar, and it gets even more extreme.
More. How so?
Their silence lasted longer, 8 months, sometimes even a full year. And they were stripped of pretty much all comforts. Ornaments gone, coarse matting for clothes, just a broken spoon and dish. Couldn't even wash properly, just their fingertips. Total isolation, deprivation. It really emphasizes that ritual state.
But it wasn't always absolute silence, was it? I think you mentioned variations.
True. With the Nandi, in what was British East Africa, widows were considered unclean, ritually speaking. They could only speak in a whisper. So not total silence, but still heavily restricted speech.
Okay. And then he crosses the Atlantic to North America.
Yes, he finds examples there too. Among the Nishinam, who were Californian Indians near Auburn, devoted widows there apparently observed absolute silence for months, sometimes more than a year.
A year of silence again.
But interestingly, just nearby, on the American River, the custom was just whispering. And then further south, towards the Cosumnes River, the custom seemed to disappear altogether.
So it could be quite localized.
Exactly. It shows how these things can vary even within a region.
Some of the North American examples seem particularly explicit about the reasons for the restrictions, like the Kwakiutl.
Ah, yes, the Kwakiutl in British Columbia. Their rules were physically incredibly demanding. For 4 days after her husband died, the widow had to sit completely still, knees to her chin, motionless.
4 days.
4 days. Then another 16 days she had to stay on the exact same spot. She could stretch her legs a bit then, but not move her hands.
That's 20 days of extreme physical restriction.
And here's the really critical part regarding silence. During that whole time, absolutely nobody was allowed to speak to her.
Not just her being silent, but others couldn't speak to her either.
Right, and the belief was if someone broke that rule, one of their own relatives would die as punishment.
A serious deterrent.
Definitely. And Frazer notes these same rules applied to widowers, too. It wasn't just women.
And then the Bellacoola, nearby Carricks, they give a reason, don't they?
They do, very explicitly. A widow had to fast for 4 days, speak no word at all. Why? Because they believed if she spoke, her dead husband's ghost would touch her mouth. And she would die. Simple as that. And again, same rule for widowers.
So there it is. The silence is explicitly a way to avoid attracting the ghost's attention, which is seen as dangerous, even fatal.
Precisely. These North American examples really hammer home that motive Frazer proposed.
Yeah.
Fear of the ghost. It's self-preservation, not just, showing sadness.
Okay, so if that's the common thread, Frazer then takes us somewhere else where this custom was apparently observed more strictly than anywhere else. Australia.
Yes, Central and Northern Australia. Some of the indigenous tribes there had truly extraordinary practices around this.
Such as?
Well, take the Waduman and Mudburra tribes in the Northern Territory. It wasn't just the widow who had to be silent. The wives of the dead man's brothers also had a ban of silence put on them.
For how long?
About 3 to 4 weeks. But here's the really chilling detail.
Go on.
This silence lasted precisely until all the flesh had decomposed from the deceased's bones.
Wow. Directly linked to the physical state of the body.
Absolutely. The belief was clearly that the ghost, the spirit, lingered as long as the flesh remained. Once only bones were left and they were ritually handled, then the danger period associated with the flesh was over.
So how did they end the silence? Was there a ceremony?
There was a specific ritual. The women would call out, "Yakir, yakir." They'd put their heads in smoke from burning leaves, get a light tap on the head, and then bite the finger of an old man. After that, they could speak again.
Quite specific actions there.
Very. Rituals often are, marking that transition clearly.
What about other tribes? The Arunta.
The Arunta, also in Central Australia, their widows would smear their hair, faces, chests with white pipe clay and stay silent.
Right. And the release ceremony.
That was quite elaborate. When a widow wanted her speech back, she'd gather a big container of food seeds or tubers she'd collected. She'd cover herself in fresh white clay, go to the center of the camp crying loudly with other women.
Okay.
Then men, usually the dead man's sons, or significantly his younger brothers, would join in. They'd take the food vessel, shout, "Whoa, whoa," make these waving motions near her face, and eventually the widow would join in the shouting, but in quieter tones at first. And that signaled her return to normal life, her speech restored.
So what did the researchers, Spencer and Gillen, make of this? What's the meaning?
Well, they saw it as symbolic. The widow is re-entering ordinary life. They used a great analogy. It's like she's switching from, deep black-edged mourning stationery to the narrow-edged kind, a transition back.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the younger brothers being significant.
Yes. And this is where it gets complex, that food offering. It's not just symbolic. It's about getting the goodwill of these men, especially the younger brothers.
Goodwill? Why?
Because, according to Spencer and Gillen, these younger brothers are described as being displeased that the widow is still alive when their brother is dead.
Displeased.
Yes. And it gets darker. If a younger brother saw the widow doing everyday things too soon after the death, he could be, and this is their term, quite justified in spearing her.
Justified in spearing her for not mourning correctly. That's shocking.
It is utterly shocking to our sensibilities. The stated reason might be about easing their grief, not wanting reminders. But Frazer, using Spencer and Gillen's insights, points to what they call the real explanation.
Which is linked to?
The levirate custom, the tradition where a widow often becomes the wife of one of her deceased husband's younger brothers.
Ah, okay. So the brother has a vested interest.
Exactly. His strict watch over her mourning isn't just about respect for his dead brother. It's also very much about his own safety. He needs to be absolutely sure the ghost is gone, that it won't be jealous or cause trouble before he potentially marries her himself.
That puts completely different sort of self-interested spin on it.
It does. It connects the ritual purity, the fear of the ghost, directly to social structures like marriage rules.
Let's look at another group, the Unmatjera and Kaitish, also Central Australia.
Yes. Their practices were slightly different again. The widow's hair was actually burnt off close to the scalp with a fire stick,
Ouch.
and her body was covered in ashes, which had to be renewed regularly.
Drive the ashes.
The belief was stark. If she didn't keep herself covered in ashes, her dead husband's spirit, thought to be following her, would kill her and strip the flesh from her bones.
Again, incredibly violent imagery associated with the ghost.
Very. And guess who enforced this?
Let me guess. The younger brother.
Bingo. He had the right to beat her severely, even kill her, if she was seen without the ashes during the main mourning period. And he was the one who eventually released her from silence, often months later, by touching her mouth with a bit of food she'd offered him.
The power dynamic there is just immense.
Truly. Then you have the Warramunga. Frazer highlights them as having perhaps the most wide-reaching silence rules.
How so?
It wasn't just the widow, it was also the deceased's mother, his sisters, his daughters, and his mothers-in-law, and this included classificatory relatives, so women who weren't direct blood relations but held that kinship title.
Good grief. How long did they have to be silent?
1 year, sometimes 2 years.
2 years. For potentially a large group of women.
Exactly. Spencer and Gillen observed that in a typical Warramunga camp, the majority of adult women might be under this ban of silence at any given time.
How do they even function? How do they communicate?
Adaptation. They became incredibly skilled in gesture language. Apparently, they could carry on quite lively conversations just using their hands and arms. Purely silent communication.
That's incredible. Human ingenuity right there.
There's even an anecdote Frazer includes about an old woman at Tennant's Creek who hadn't spoken, except maybe the bare minimum to eat or drink, for over 25 years.
25 years?
Can you imagine living in silence for decades, communicating solely through gestures?
It really makes you reconsider language and communication.
Yeah.
So how did they get released from silence? Was it complex?
Surprisingly simple, actually. A woman wanting her speech back would apply to men who were her classificatory sons. She'd offer them a big cake made of grass seed.
Okay.
And the ceremony was just her biting the finger of each man who was releasing her. After that, she was free to talk.
Biting fingers again. Interesting.
There's another Warramunga mourning practice Frazer mentions that's particularly gruesome.
Oh.
The widow would cut her hair short, then cut open the skin along the middle line of her scalp,
Right.
and then run a burning fire stick along the bleeding wound. Self-mutilation as part of mourning, sometimes, apparently, with serious infections or consequences.
Layers upon layers of ritual hardship.
Indeed. And one last quick Australian example, the Dieri, also Central Australia. Their widows smeared themselves with white clay.
Like some others.
Yes, but they couldn't speak until all the clay had naturally crumbled off, which could take months. And during that time, gesture language again.
So if we pull all these threads together, Africa, North America, Australia,
Yeah.
the core motive seems pretty consistent.
It really does. The overarching reason Frazer identifies for the silent widow custom is that fear of attracting the ghost's attention. Silence is about hiding, eluding the spirit.
And the other things, ditching nice clothes, shaving hair, the clay, the ashes.
Those seem geared towards making oneself unattractive or repulsive to the ghost, disguising oneself perhaps, or actively disgusting the spirit to make it go away.
And the younger brother's role, especially in Australia, seems tightly bound up with that levirate marriage custom.
Absolutely. His often quite intimidating oversight of the widow's mourning. It's not just abstract respect for his dead brother, it's deeply practical and, you could say, selfish.
Selfish in what way?
Because marrying a widow was seen as risky. The first husband's ghost might be jealous, so the younger brother needed to be absolutely certain that the mourning was done properly, that the ghost was well and truly gone before he took the risk of marrying her. It was about his own future safety.
Right. So let's loop back finally to where we started this whole thing. That Hebrew word, almana.
Yes, the potential link to silent woman.
After looking at all these parallels around the world, which are incredibly striking, Frazer still sounds a note of caution, doesn't he?
He does. He's very careful to state that while the parallels are suggestive, the direct evidence for this specific silent widow custom among the ancient Hebrews really hinges only on that doubtful etymology.
So it's not a slam dunk.
Not at all. As Frazer himself says, trying to infer a custom just from the possible origin of a word is always exceedingly precarious. It's an intriguing idea, supported by global parallels, but not definitively proven for the Hebrews from the word alone.
Still, what an incredible journey Fraser takes us on in this chapter. From a linguistic puzzle in Hebrew, out across continents.
To the Congo, Madagascar, British Columbia, deep into the Australian outback.
All tracking this one specific unusual custom, the enforced silence of the bereaved.
It really reveals something profound, doesn't it? Even if the Hebrew link is uncertain, looking at the silent widow phenomenon across these cultures, well, what does it tell you about that universal human need?
The need to make sense of death.
Yeah, and to manage grief, navigate that feeling of the unseen world, the presence of the dead, whether it's through silence or gestures or clay or fire sticks. These are all ways humans have tried to cope, to control, to understand.
It makes you wonder, how do our own societies do that today? Maybe the expressions are different, more subtle perhaps than a year of silence or a coating of ash. But are those fundamental needs still finding ways to be expressed?
That's the question, isn't it? Something for you to think about until our next deep dive.